you have the pleasure of being with a really esteemed panel of women who have been leaders over the years in making sure you, as WBEs, have a path to travel to corporate America, and for corporate America, giving us the insights to make our organizations better at doing supplier diversity. So I'm going to start with introducing Pamela Prince Eason. And I am going to tell you that Pam is a dynamic leader of WBENC. She's been there 6 years and has taken the organization to a whole different level. And she does that because she listens to all of her stakeholders, and she has a way of collaborating and then implementing change that I think is hard to replicate. So hearing her version of the state of women-owned business is going to be a real treat. Sitting next to Pamela is Candace Waterman. And anybody that knows Pam knows Candace. And we know that Candace is very dynamic in her own right. And she actually knows all of us very well because she pays attention to us as individuals and to the corporations that we lead. And now she has a very dynamic role of being president and CEO of WIPP, Women Impacting Public Policy. Now that is a treat for us because WIPP is going to partner with WBENC, and we've got the two dynamic duals in separate paths that merge to make sure all of us have a better outcome in terms of supplier diversity. So Women Impacting Public Policy then will make sure that legislators vote the right way, and that's for women. Yes. So we'll be looking forward to hearing what Candace has to say about where she's going with WIPP and her version of the state of women-owned businesses. Elizabeth Vasquez has also been leading the WeConnect forever. She's a co-founder of WeConnect and was able to see very early on that there was a reason for women-owned businesses to not only do business in the U.S. but across the world. And there was also a need to match those companies that were in other countries with those of us in the U.S. to make even a bigger impact on corporate America. Many of the corporations are global, and we hear that sometimes as a barrier, but with her organization, it helps reduce that barrier. And so we'll be very happy to hear what you have to say, Elizabeth. And our WBE on the panel, Michel Ruiz. Michelle has been in communications for many years, and that is something new, something that she'll bring to this panel because she sees supplier diversity from several venues as a WBE, and then she works with many of the corporations to help us with how we market our supplier diversity processes and how we can be bolder both internally and externally on how we influence change in supplier diversity. So her perspective will also be very different this morning, and we're glad to have you, Michelle. Now, our moderator today is a delight. I like to say our moderator is the most entertaining supplier diversity professional in the network. And so that is Scott Vowels, who not only is co-founder of the Bigger Discussion, and anybody that knows Scott knows he can ask the most provocative questions, so very appropriate that he would be one of the co-founders of this kind of discussion. But he's also an author of 2 books, and he's done this session for the last 2 years, in addition to what you do for Apple in terms of leading their supplier diversity effort. So I want you all to sit back, be really engaged. This is, I promise this to be the most entertaining discussion on supplier diversity. You have an opportunity to ask questions, and I think you were asked to fill out some cards, but then we'll also take questions from the floor. And there's no holds barred, so feel free to ask whatever's on your mind. You've got the right people in front of you to answer those questions, and we want it to be provocative. Don't hold anything back. So with that, I'm going to ask Scott to please take over as moderator for the panel.
Well, first off, it's truly an honor to be introduced by Deborah because she was extremely modest, but anybody who's been in supplier diversity for a minute knows her, and so even though she's probably like 20 years old, I know she's been doing this a minute, so I appreciate that I stand on her shoulders. So any success I have, the stuff that I've done that hasn't been that good, you've had no part in. Real quickly, how many of you saw the Bigger Discussion 5 that we did at NMSDC? And those of you that may have seen it or know anything about it know that I said on stage that would be my last bigger discussion. And so I absolutely meant that would be my last bigger discussion because we had the leaders from NMSDC, we had Pam from the Veterans Organization, from NGLCC, and I told Fela and Al that there's no way we could possibly top that panel, so I just didn't want to do it anymore. And then I got the call from Fela Meyer, president of WBENC South, with this idea. And I said, well, I don't know what panel you could put together for women-owned businesses that would, make me want to do this again. And then she came up with this panel. So I will not say that this is my last bigger discussion. So that being said, we will establish some ground rules, and the ground rules are that, ladies, we're all going to be respectful of each other.
That's not an issue for us.
and
probably do need that with other people.
And most importantly, you're going to be respectful of your moderator. I wasn't really concerned about you. The other thing is, although I will try to start the conversation going as it is a bigger discussion, if somebody says something and you want to jump in or respond, feel free. If one of you says something that prompts a question, feel free to ask. I'm just the conduit from which we will start this. Let's see, are those all the housekeeping notes I have? Yes. Okay, so real quickly, even though Deborah did an amazing job. Oh, the last thing is, we're going to try to, because we've got so much information to pack in, and even though we've got like a little bit more than an hour, it goes pretty quickly, so we're going to try to limit our answers to like 2 or 3 minutes. If I, give you the Sandman and start pulling you, it's not personal, it's just we got to keep going. So with that being said, here's our test. We're going to take a minute or 2 minutes each to say just once again who you are, what your organization is, possibly the mission of your organization or business, and then we'll kick it off with some lightweight questions to get everybody started. And we'll start with Pam.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela Eason. I am the president and CEO of WBENC. I have the distinct honor of representing all of you as we focus on issues with women, trying to break down the barriers for competitiveness in both the corporate and the government workspace. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to have this job. You are the best group of people to support, both on the corporate side and on the WBE side. So thank you very much.
Time's up. Oh, no. I was eager. Candace.
Scott. Good morning, everyone. I am Candace Waterman. I am the president and CEO of Women Impacting Public Policy, more lovingly known as WIPP, and we are your voice on the Hill. We are the leading advocacy organization on the Hill for women in business, as well as the leading procurement education organization for government contractors in the government space as well. And like Pam said, I have the distinct honor to represent all of you and be your voice on the Hill so that we can ensure legislation is in place that is pro-business and pro-women.
Great job, Cam.
So thank you, WBENC South, and to Scott and my friends here on this panel to get to have this conversation. I'm Elizabeth Vasquez, the CEO and co-founder of WeConnect International, and we were created almost 10 years ago by many of you, the largest corporations in the world, who said if it's good to buy from women-owned businesses here in the United States, Why wouldn't we do this everywhere we source? So I'm proud to announce that as of last week, when we met with a delegation from Cambodia, we now have women-owned businesses based in 106 countries. And by the end of this year, we'll be certifying in 45 countries.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Michelle?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so very much, Fela, for asking me to join you. And it's a pleasure to come back here after I was here a couple years ago, I remember, at a luncheon where I spoke. So Michel Ruiz is my name. I'm the CEO and founder of actually a couple companies, Ruiz Strategies, which is the one that's most known in this community. Also my newest company, which is in startup mode, called Biassess Strategies, providing solutions to manage and assess implicit bias in the workplace. So we're in startup mode in that company. I'm also a board member as it pertains to this conversation for an organization called IWIC, the International Women's Entrepreneurial Conference, which is focused on helping women and recognizing women who have global businesses. So helping women grow their businesses globally, but also help recognizing those who are doing very well in this space.
Excellent. Okay, so like I said, just to get everybody warmed up, I thought I'd start off with something, not that controversial. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we had this Occupy movement going on, right? And then, maybe a year or two ago, there was Black Lives Matter. And so I'm a little concerned because lately I've been seeing all these initiatives for women, like whether it's women of color, women growing capacity. And I'd like each of you to tell me, because I'm afraid that this emphasis on women-owned businesses is going to go the wayside of the Occupy movement and Black Lives Matter. Tell me why that's not true.
So Scott, I'll start with that. Here is what I would say. The traditional way, and this is in your book, by the way, the traditional way of looking at supplier diversity was around the fact that it was a program, right? You were really focusing on there was an issue, and it was the right thing to do to change and do something different. The business case for doing business with women is really much more about effectiveness on the economy, right? So for your business is going to be more successful in involving women and small businesses in your supply chain. Hopefully you're going to have better solutions, better products. And what women do with the economy, and I don't want to take too much of other people's thunder, so I'll back off on this, is what women do in the economy is they spread what wealth they get around the economy. And so what I think is there's been a lack of parity between men and women. However, I don't mean to say anything negative about men at all, but there has been a lack of parity. It's also fair to say that for white women, it's been a little easier than for people of color, right? And so there's a whole pyramid scheme almost as you look at all of that to determine what parity needs to exist. That is a true business imperative to get better solutions, to impact the communities that you work in. And so because of that, I don't think it's going to change. It's not a campaign to say, hey, let's do business with women, or hey, let's make sure that women progress in the workplace. It really is an economic impact to the United States of America and outside the U.S.
It's so hard to argue. It's so hard to argue with Pam, especially when she references my book. But Candace, I'm not yet convinced. Help me.
Well,
So, and I think everything that Pam just said is absolutely amazingly true. And on top of that, I think this women's movement, if you will, right, I consider this really the century of the woman. However, our voices are not going to be lost as long as we are in positions of leadership, influence, power, and impact. As long as we have seats at every seat of the at every table, and it's not just about the seat, it's about the voice, and it's using your voice effectively to know you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the masses, right? So I strongly believe as long as we have women at every table that we're at, you can't lose the voice. The same way, to be honest with you, I don't think that some of the other campaigns or initiatives or drives that are going on that you mentioned are gone away. It's just naturally ebbs and flows to everything. And I think the talk about the woman, she crosses every one of those, right? From veterans to international, to LGBT, to Me Too, to Black Lives Matter. So we're never going to get lost because we are in every sector of this world.
Elizabeth, tell me how it looks globally.
Okay, let's be very clear, Scott. Women, we are here to stay. So we are half the population. We own a third of the world's businesses. We make or influence 85% of all the world's purchasing decisions. And yet, we represent 1% of the global supply chains, of the suppliers to the large corporations, of the suppliers to governments globally. And that's just stupid. It's bad business, and it's bad for our communities. And so the fact that we're here, we're getting organized, we're now using technology to connect women-owned businesses with each other and with our male champions of change, and we're leveraging our purchasing power, which is soon to be $20 trillion. So if we decide to this world isn't working for us the way it is, we're gonna spend just 10% of our money with other women, $2 trillion into the global economy every single year. So it's up to us.
All right, give me the entrepreneurial perspective.
Well, I would say, Scott, first of all, we have these time periods in history where certain things happen that propel movements, and obviously we're seeing that now. We're in the midst, literally in the midst of that today with the hearings that are going on. I think that these movements continue to help things move forward, but what you're seeing happening legislatively, not just in this country but in other countries, is solidifying the importance, the recognition of how women contribute positively to the economy, and global economies, not just the U.S. economies, right? So in the U.S., you're obviously seeing this big push to get more women elected into legislative positions. So with that comes decisions and influence and things like that. I think we're seeing this in other countries as well. So I'm absolutely convinced that while these movements that get a lot of attention, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Me Too or those kinds of things get a lot of attention, it doesn't mean that while the movement may kind of dissipate for a while, it doesn't mean that the progress goes away.
So just to kind of piggyback on that, Pam, you mentioned earlier, said something about men, so I'm going to piggyback off that. But so it's with the current Me Too movement that's happening, and I think that's bringing to light some issues that women have faced for hundreds of years. So I think it's important, but is that impacting the business community at all? Or is it positively impacting the business community? Is it negatively impacting the business community, or no impact at all?
So let me think about how to answer that in the most appropriate way. What I would say is there always needs to be an outlet for someone who has been wronged in any situation to be able to come forward. And obviously the closer to that event occurring, the better that can be. But people live in times where that's not always possible. And so I think that movement is bringing up emotions in people who may feel they've been treated similarly, or even people who may have regretted some of what they've done, right? And so I think it's impacting from that standpoint. It's causing a reaction in the business world, right? For, oh my gosh, somebody's been wronged, in generally, not a specific situation. And so we need policies in place to handle certain things. We need to ensure parity and fairness and safety and all that. We all believe that, right? So yes, the companies do need to do that. The reason some of that is happening now is because of these movements, as you say. From a business world perspective, my concern right? Because I do think it's impacting it, though I would really applaud, in particular, the men in the WBENC network. And when I say WBENC, I mean WBENC South, I mean our 14 regional partners, I mean our partners outside the U.S., I mean our partnership with WIPP. So I mean generally our WBENC community. We have what I consider an extraordinary group of he's for she's, right? And Scott, you're certainly one of those, and many of the gentlemen in here, all of the gentlemen in here most likely, are true believers in parity in the supply chain, in competition, and that the best person get the job, right? So you're not saying, hey, I'm a handout, give me something. You're saying, I've got something to contribute, and I want you to see that, right? And so the men in our particular community have not gone into whiplash and said, oh my God, I can't go to that reception tonight because somebody might report that I had my arm around someone, right? And that is the concern for me in our environment, because networking, mentoring, those sorts of things, you don't always mentor sitting across a desk from someone, right? You can be in some situations that on their own might not look good. That has always been the concern for me in our network, because I don't see that we have this wide audience of people who try to take advantage of other people or say you can't have work here if you don't do this with me or anything like that. So I believe that there are real issues out there. I believe that they need to be addressed. I believe in our particular situation, for those of us across the panel here, that our hope is that we can continue to work with the wonderful businesses that we have to ensure that women's business development occurs, that we're supportive of all small business that is out there, and that we always provide the men in our network a safe environment to mentor us and to help us with business development. So to me, our particular community, I am very proud of the men that are in this particular network.
Candace, anything to add?
No, I absolutely agree with what Pam said, and I think from a policy perspective, right, if I put on my policy and legislative hat, it is incumbent upon us, right, who are on the Hill, to really advocate from a workforce development perspective about safe work environment. And that's everyone, men, women, LGBT. What is it policy-wise that we can put in place to ensure that we're all protected, men and women? Because Me Too is not just about women, right? It's on both sides. And it is ensuring that the policies that you have, that there are repercussions to it, there are processes around it, right? So that the person feels safe to bring their whole selves to work. Because if I really think about it, I think about our LGBT sisters and brothers, right? That, to be honest, they are nervous going into some situations themselves as well. So safe work environment, in my opinion, is more of a focus than just Me Too. That's not in any way, shape, or form to be offensive to Me Too at all. But safe work environment, I think, encompasses the Me Too and then other situations that we have, from neutral bathrooms and other things.
So I'd like to, Elizabeth or Michelle, if you guys would like to add anything.
Yeah, actually, I have, my comments are really coming from two different perspectives. The first is, I think the Me Too movement is having a positive impact in corporate America, and from the perspective of it's causing organizations, a lot of organizations, to relook at how women are valued, treated, considered, evaluated in the workplace. And we do know, frankly, that more women in senior leadership positions leads to innovation. So I think the Me Too movement has had and will continue to have a positive impact. But we're not seeing the full effect of that today, because we're still in this period of struggling, which happens every time a movement arises. We go from one end of the spectrum to then the other end of the spectrum, and then we kind of land somewhere in the middle, right? And to your point, Pam, addressing, it's caused concern in some organizations with men and women, and how do they interact, and what's appropriate, what's not. If I say this to, hey, your dress is nice today, is that wrong? Or, so it's leading to a lot of uncertainty at the moment, but I think that we'll find a place sooner than later where things will kind of say, okay, this is the new norm. So I think the opportunities for women will continue to grow as a result of that. I will actually share a story. So I have experienced sexual harassment. I experienced it when I was in broadcasting. Again, in situations where men have had are in positions of influence or power. So in broadcasting, it was with an agent who's no longer alive, a television agent, who basically expected that I would sleep with him in order for him to help me get considered for reporting and anchoring jobs at the networks. And so I've experienced it where he actually physically groped me and, and invited me to his house and things like that. So now, fast forward. Now, at that time, when I was in my, I just graduated college, so 26, 27, there was no way I could say anything to anyone because he had the ability to blackball me. So, didn't say anything. A few people know, but I didn't make it an issue. Fast forward, I've actually experienced it as a business owner. And I've actually experienced it in this environment where there is a representative of a corporation who I was introduced to at a business event, and he decided that he wanted to continue the discussion at my hotel and followed me from the business event to the hotel, and then in the lobby of the hotel, while I was sitting and talking with some people that I knew, suggested that that we should continue our meeting in my hotel room. And I said, that's not going to happen. And that happened about 3 years ago. And I've thought about it because, interestingly enough, now first of all, I just went on. I've seen the individual here or there. I acknowledge, I'm cordial, I'm polite. But I wondered, should I say anything to his corporate leaders that this is an individual in this context, literally in this context, a women-owned business event where this happened. And I thought, well, no, I don't want to do that because how much influence do I have as a potential supplier influencing something that happens within the corporation? So I decided to stay silent on it, even though there are a few people who do know. After this Me Too movement, I'm wondering, would my decision be different? Because if he's doing it to me, clearly he's doing it to other people, and this is a person who has the ability to introduce women into that corporation's supply chain and decision makers. So yes, Pam.
Pam, jump in there.
Just would love to ask a question, and this is not of a grilling nature or anything, but I know Michelle, right? And you're a very strong, powerful woman, very successful, and you would have an option to say something to the corporation, but if it happened in the context of the type of world that Fela and I are in, would you feel uncomfortable saying something to me or to Fela about that?
That's an interesting question. Today, after everything that we've seen occur over the last 3 years, I think I probably would be comfortable. Okay. And say, you should just know, this happened to me. Yes, but my point is 3 years ago, before the whole Me Too movement, no, I don't need that corporation's business to be successful. Just check that corporation off my list. Like, okay, so, not pursuing business
Michelle,
with that corporation.
I apologize to you for all of us who run this part of the community, because I meant what I said earlier. We have really got a tremendous group of people that we bring together in this network. And what I would say to Michelle and to every one of you out there, men and women, because some of you men can get approached as well, please know that this network takes very seriously your safety, as Candace said, and that we never want any of you ever in a position that you feel that you're compromised in any way, or that you would have to compromise yourself in order to get something. That is not what this network is. We do not see that on a routine basis in any way. And so please, I will say to Michelle, I'm sorry, and to all of you, know that we are available to you. I know I speak for Fela, for our other 13 regional partner leaders, as well as our partner organizations. So please know that you can always feel safe. We have whistleblower situations. As a matter of fact, Jill, if you'll stand up, Jill Sasso is our governance person for the entire WBENC network. And any of you can email Jill at jsasso@webenc.org. It's on our website, easy for you to see. And we actually keep these things, it's an ethics complaint, and we follow up with our legal counsel on those items, and it's protected. The information is not shared. It's researched and treated appropriately. So please know that. And Michelle, again, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know you're very sincere. And I'm glad actually that I decided to bring it up because I didn't even realize that this was an option. Like I said, people who know me know I can be very direct. Okay, so I can say no. Like I said to this individual, that's not going to happen. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow at the event, kind of thing. So, but I do think that, I do know that if it's happened to me, this individual is in a position, again, of power or influence. He has the ability to make introductions within the organization. So that's the classic scenario. So I'm glad at least that me bringing it up raised the options to how to communicate around that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So back to your question. So I think that, yes, my tweetable moment is that I think the Miche movement does, in fact, and will continue to have a positive impact in corporate America, both for employees, but also for women-owned businesses, I think.
So, Elizabeth, from a global perspective, I think it's true that in many countries, women are still considered second-class citizens. So how do you see this impacting? Is Me Too going global, or is it?
It is global. It's not
still
going, yeah, it's definitely, I've spent my week at the UN, all the various General Assembly meetings, and it's a global conversation. This is not specific to any country or region, any class, age, sexuality. This is something that all of us have to be aware of, that this has been happening forever, and it doesn't work for us, and we're half the population, and we have to make a decision that this is going to stop now. So it was very empowering to be in a series of conversations over the last week, but it's been happening throughout the year, but especially this particular week, where you bring together leaders in women's economic empowerment from India, from South Africa, from Nigeria, from Singapore, from Canada, from Germany, everyone sharing their stories and their challenges, but then we're agreeing that we're going to work together to fix it. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to be silent. And we're going to talk about it. And men, obviously, being a part of this conversation is absolutely critical. They too have faced awkward situations, and it's not acceptable for them either. So this is something we all have to work on together. And really proud of the corporations that we work with that I know are trying to tackle this. And when we find individuals in our community that aren't abiding by our ethics and our values, we ask them to leave.
So, flipping the script for a minute, and I'm going to, very rarely I'm going to ask an individual a question, but Candace. So I've been in supplier diversity for almost 15 years or more. And so I've heard that WIPP has been around for 17 years?
17 years, we have.
Why have I never heard of WIPP until you took over?
That's
Well, that's, thank you. You answered your own question. So first, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. I think to be honest with you, like most things that are important to us, they come to the forefront when they're important to us. In this economic climate we're in right now, WIPP's mission and vision and what we do is vitally important to the success of what we're doing. I think that I bring a sort of different visibility to the organization just by virtue of being in an amazing network, right, such as this. So it just allows me now to leverage the relationships that I have so that I can talk about who WIPP is. I mean, if I think about it, like Pam and I have had this conversation, when Pam first started with WBENC, it was almost in the same situation. People knew who WBENC was, but you didn't know like you know today, right? It's almost like the situation of saying, oh, I need a tissue versus I need a Kleenex, right? So now when you think about certification, you're like, oh yeah, I need to talk to WBENC. It's not, I need to talk about certification. So I think that, and I hope that as I am out in the community more, as we're having conversations, that I'm changing the narrative to our organization, that WIPP is first and foremost, so that you know whatever you see on television from a policy perspective, and that's federal, state, local, that you know that WIPP is in the forefront representing you. So I think that has a lot to do with it, just by virtue of the position I was in before, the relationships I'm able to leverage to give more visibility to this amazing organization. And I would be remiss if I did not say I am standing on the shoulders of an amazing founder in Barbara Kassoff. I literally can walk into any congressperson, senator's office on that Hill, and they welcome me with open arms. I attended my first Senate hearing after 5 days being in this position. There were 13, my board members are laughing at me. There were 13 senators in the Small Business Senate Committee hearing that I was in. And after the meeting was over, 7 of them personally came up to me and said, I'm happy you're in this position. We heard about you. We can't wait to work with you. And I am Switzerland in this situation. So I have friends on both sides of the aisles because I'm issue-oriented and driven, not political driven, right? As I say, WIPP is policy, not politics, though clearly you need to understand the political process.
No, and I think that's invaluable, and I think it's important that we have friends on both sides of the aisles, and so I do not want those in the audience to think I have a political affiliation one way or the other just because of my Barack Obama socks.
Barack's smiling at me the whole time.
And this just may be me, but I'm trying to, and I don't know if reconcile is the right word, but we're constantly challenging our diverse businesses, whether they be minority, veteran, LGBTQ women, to be more global in nature. So, and I'm challenging my US-based businesses to be more global in nature, but I also want to be on the correct side of history in supporting women-owned businesses that are global or that are in other countries. So I'm trying to reconcile, and so Pam and Elizabeth, can you guys help me? Because I don't know that I can do both, or should I do? I mean, how are we? I don't know if there's a conflict between WeConnect or how.
I'm sorry, we're going to disappoint you. We actually have a strong memorandum of understanding between our organizations. And Elizabeth and I meet very frequently until, I guess, the last 6 years, we've actually been in the same space, on the same floor in a location in Washington, D.C. And I think that we've made a clear decision across our leadership teams to have U.S. scope very much focused on strategically by the WBENC network, and outside of the United States, our partnership is with WeConnect International, and that we actually encourage all of you who have operations and activities outside of the U.S. to only do business with them because they are our partner. I'm sure you've noticed that we bring our events together at our national conference time. We do that because there's a tremendous synergy between women here in the U.S. I'll use Alta Baker, who's sitting right here, certified woman-owned business right here in this particular territory that Fayla and I know very well, who does a lot of significant business outside of the United States, though I think mostly with the federal government, and is very tied to what Elizabeth does as well. And so for us, we believe, and I think this is one of the things that's making our network become more successful, is that we're starting to be leaders of organizations, including our 14 regional partners, who actually support each other versus compete with each other. So do you have to move some of your money from the WBENC network over to Elizabeth because of priority changes in your business? It may happen, Scott. What I hope is that all of you don't do that at the same time, right? But what I believe is that there's going to be, global is here, right? I worked for Pfizer, I understand that very well. And so I want to make sure that our network is able to support everything that someone based here in the United States needs to do. And if Elizabeth has somebody who wants to partner with someone here in the U.S., that we're able to support that, and that resources from commerce, et cetera, are available to help with understanding import-export. WIPP is available for that. And I want to make sure that we've got that available. And for all the people who are not going global, this network is going to remain extremely strong in order to focus on that as well. But we're capable of doing both. And at times we recognize money may shift from one place to the other, but that's what you need to do. And I believe as long as we're delivering services across our network with the 14 regional partners and with Elizabeth, that we're providing the best support to you as corporate members who fund our organizations. So you're not going to get a problem out of me.
Yeah, no
Elizabeth?
problem here, truly. I mean, you
Yeah.
couldn't ask for a better partner. It's a $76 trillion global economy. We don't have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
There's plenty of money out there. There's plenty of opportunity out there. We just have to make sure that all the world's women have an equal opportunity to compete and to win and to know that they should be knocking on doors of these companies that genuinely want to leverage their purchasing power with women-owned businesses and don't know where to find them globally. And globally, the women, it doesn't even occur to them to try to do business with some of the companies that we work with, whether it's Apple or ExxonMobil or Chevron or many of the companies in this group that we all work with. And so I know when we first started, there were several WBENC women-owned businesses that were saying how grateful they were that there was a partner, a sister organization that would help them with their global vision for their companies. And there were others that said, how could you do this to us? It's hard enough for us to get contracts, and now you're introducing all these foreigners into this network and introducing them to our corporate buyers. But I don't think that they fully appreciated that 95% of the world's consumers are based outside of the United States. These companies aren't going to pick U.S. over other countries or other countries over the U.S. It's the U.S. and other countries. And these women, we need to make sure that the U.S. women-owned businesses through WBENC and the networks here have access to the women-owned businesses in other countries, which is why if you're based in the U.S., you have to be WBENC certified if you want to join the WeConnect International network and our database that is used to connect women across 106 countries now. So definitely not an either or, it's a plus, 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 and we are just so honored to not have to ask for help. You're always looking for ways for us to work together because we have a bigger mission, and it's not just about women, it's the broader conversation of inclusion and how we all spend our money and making sure that it actually has an impact.
Michelle,
Can I ask
Candace, jump in there.
Because I think both Pam and Elizabeth have spoken from the corporate side.
Yeah.
And I don't want either of them to forget the amazing work they do for the WBE side, right? So you just said it, like 3 times. There are opportunities. The women who are based in the U.S. understand the corporations, they understand the supply chain, they understand what it takes to integrate into it, where women in other countries may not understand that. So there are learnings that are there are JV opportunities, there are strategic alliance opportunities, because a lot of times our U.S.-based WBEs don't understand the country policies and idiosyncrasies from that side. So I look at it, as I think both of you do, as an extension of a beautiful marriage and opportunity between the two. So to your point, Elizabeth, it's not an or, it's an and.
So, and Michelle, I'd want to ask you, so obviously you're a very successful woman-owned business, but in the big scheme of things, I'd still consider you a small to medium business. So is going global actually realistic for?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, I'm on the board of IWIC, and as a result of my involvement in that organization with the intent to go global, that's why I joined that organization, became active in it, I realized that there was significant opportunity for women-owned businesses who are thinking globally. And even just in my conversations with corporations through the supplier diversity space, a lot of these corporations want women-owned businesses that have a global reach because they want to spend more, and a lot of women aren't thinking globally. But I think never before has it been easier to do business globally than today, primarily because of globalization, innovations in technology, trade agreements that are happening, and now statistically we know that women-owned businesses that do business globally are actually more financially successful and have higher revenues than those businesses that are not global. But talking about parity, the statistics show right now that there's more parity between women and male-owned businesses in developing economies. So places like Latin America and Asia, as an example, there's more parity. More women are at the table, as are men. We're seeing that less in more developed countries like the United States, and it's not clear, the data doesn't show why. But the key message is there are opportunities, there are resources now available, and the key identifiers as to why women aren't thinking globally is one, that hasn't even occurred to them. So if it hasn't occurred to you, here's your message, think globally. The second thing is not knowing where to get resources and not knowing where to go, and then thinking about languages and those. So there's, both in the United States, there's, the Department of Commerce and all the different subsidiary organizations. There's obviously WeConnect, and there's others, and there's consulates that will connect you. There's trade missions that happen. I mean, there's a lot of resources if you want to do it in terms of selling not only products, but also services. And if you're consumer-based or part of your business is consumer-based, my gosh, again, because of the innovations around technology. I was just in Shanghai 2 weeks ago speaking on this very same topic about globalization for women-owned businesses. And one of the women on the panel with me is in the payment business, and her company is all about electronic payments and the innovations that are happening there. Her company's innovations are helping women-owned businesses become global. So there's a lot of opportunity, but we need to be able to, one, be willing to consider it, and two, do the research and find out where the resources are.
I was actually just in Beijing, and they were laughing at me because I was trying to pay with cash, local currency, but cash. And they're like, "Where's your phone?" They just couldn't even believe that I'd be so backwards to try to use. But I do think that things are changing really fast in other countries. Just quick example, project we're doing with the World Bank, they said there's huge opportunity in Bangladesh. This is the assessment of the World Bank with the government of Bangladesh. But everyone I spoke with said, oh no, women-owned businesses, micro-enterprises, they're in the informal sector, and the corporates, the big ones in Bangladesh, they're not going to care about this. Completely wrong. We were on the ground, women-owned businesses with thousands of employees. One of them, she had 20,000 employees. And then we met with the men, they are all men right now, who own the largest conglomerates. These are holding companies across manufacturing, energy, and everything you can imagine. And they said, why are you here? We don't need you here. 5 years from now, our daughters, they are taking over our companies, and they will run this country. So you can do this work, and it's nice and that's great for 5 years, but after that, have an exit strategy. Because the women are here and they are taking over, and it's a good time to be in Bangladesh.
Good thing to hear.
One, it's amazing the countries that you've gone to, and I was just privileged to come to New Orleans. So, it is what it is. So I'd be interested to know, and this one I will hold each of you to 3 minutes or less. So Pam, WBENC's done some amazing things. Candace, WIPP's done some amazing things. WeConnect, and Michelle. So what do you see is going to be hot on your plate, or what's your focus going to be for the next 12 months, and then maybe 3 to 5 years in 3 minutes or less?
I can do it. So we really focus on kind of certification, opportunities, resources, and then engaging people. We believe that that's what makes women successful in working in this network. And so we're going to continue to be the premier certifier, easy piece of cake. We're going to potentially look at doing some advanced certifications and different things like that. So be on the lookout for that. That's probably in the next 12 months. From an opportunities perspective, we're going to continue to bring the very best opportunities to you in the form of regional events like this, as well as national events like those coming up in Houston in March and in Baltimore in June. So make sure that you mark your calendars for that. As a matter of fact, you'll have the opportunity to see all these organizations at that time in Baltimore, so make sure you mark your calendar. From a resources perspective, we have tremendous programming opportunities and development opportunities for our WBEs, and we have a large group of the people who support that in the room. Our oil and gas industry-specific development program, thanks to BP, ExxonMobil, Shell, and Chevron, is being played out in Roberts, Louisiana in a little less than a month, where we're going to have 30 women who are going through a very concentrated program focused on being successful in the oil and gas industry. And I see WBEs who went through that program last year here, and I see WBEs who are going to be in the program this year. So we are doing a number of very industry-specific activities to develop women who want to do business in more advanced roles in a supply chain, which I think is very different than anybody else who is out there. And so I welcome that. I think that our organization, let's say 7 years ago, was primarily referred to as an only white women organization. We've made really big leaps and changes to ensure that we're fully inclusive and that we're about all women business owners, race, sexuality, whatever that is. And so we're going to continue to focus on what may sound like a program, focusing on attracting women of color to our network, but that's only because we understand that the demographic that's out there is shifting, and we need to make sure that we're providing these great resources for women of color. So we're going to have big emphasis around that. We recognize that we need to mold some of our activities to be attractive to millennials. Right? The same old thing that we've been doing isn't going to work with millennials. So you're going to see a lot of effort around doing that sort of thing. And then again, we're going to be really striving to make your interactions with us very purposeful, and that every time you walk away with something from that engagement, as well as true ROI for having spent time with us. So that's us.
Oh, if you weren't so damn personable, I would have cut you off like 2 minutes ago. Okay. Candace.
All right, I'm personable too, so you better not cut me. No. So for me, for those of you who don't know, I just came into this role in May. And then for those of you who know me, know I came into this role with the strategic plan on day one. So our strategic plan for 2018 and 2019, I've solidified it. So I started at the top saying that we are a two-part organization, right? Advocacy engagement, that's on the Hill for you, and then procurement education, that's the how to do business. So I'll start with the advocacy side, right? So 5 quick points, but we know in this landscape, I could be on the Hill talking about 100 things, right? But just 5. Creating parity for women in business, right, in the government sector, tax reform and modernization, access to capital, which is huge, right? Infrastructure improvements, that we have women in every part of this world, and we want to ensure they have internet access and the things that they need to be successful in their companies. And last is workforce development. Workforce development for us is gets kind of granular, right? Safe work environment, the gig economy, apprenticeship programs, right? And then child care and leave, right? Medical Leave Act. Those things affect the way business is done in this country. We have what we call some sort of popcorn items that come up. Doesn't mean they're not important. It means they're super important at that particular time. And so for us right now, that's import-export. Michelle just talked about it, that's super important. So 5-point plan on the advocacy side, 3-point plan on the education side. Absolutely understanding the procurement landscape. If I'm on a Hill saying I want women to have more access, they've got to be ready, willing, and able, right? And understand how to fulfill, how to show up, right? So understanding the procurement landscape in government is very different than understanding it on the commercial side, right? So that's one. The second is building capacity. If in fact you've been awarded a contract, what does that mean, right? From a financial management perspective, to your HR, is it everything in place there from your skills, right? You can get a contract, a 5-year award with the government, put down that you have your SME is Pam, right? I'm going to use this as an example. Pam is part of the gig economy, and she leaves my company after 2 years. Does that change how my contract is going to be delivered, right? So our women need to understand that, right? So that's building capacity. And last is the wealth piece, right? Is understanding that we need to finance our growth. Financing growth with big bank, with regional bank, with investors are all very different. So you need to know how to show up. Is investment right for me? And then investing in or financing your exit, right? So that is important. So 3 points on the procurement side, 5 points on the legislative side. And I will say for our organization, we are a membership-based organization, so I believe that all women business owners should be active and participatory in our organization, so I want that to happen. I also run a foundation. On the foundation side, I've got a women's bureau, speakers bureau that we're launching, and then a great program for STEAM program that we'll likely partner with WBENC on that. So 2 separate organizations and a lot of stuff going on.
So I'm just based on what you said, I'm assuming I can't be a part of the women's speaker organization. Okay. Anyway, Elizabeth, let's go to you.
But you can be a member as a he's for she with us.
So bottom line, I want to get a lot more money into the hands of women as fast as possible. So for our members, that means, thank you.
Yeah.
Because that is but it's a team effort, right? There is no one organization, there is no one government, there is no one multilateral that can do this on their own. This is a team effort. So I need your help. Seriously. We need more corporations to commit to leveraging their purchasing power to be more inclusive in their sourcing practices. We need more women-owned businesses having a vision of wanting to be and taking the steps it takes to be connected. It's really hard when you're focused on your business, but to look up and be a part of a movement. That's what we're learning for some work we're doing with ExxonMobil in our global community now across these over 100 countries is, yes, they recognize we're a certifying body, and that's what makes us different as a women's economic empowerment organization outside of the US. But what they really want is to be a part of something that impacts lives. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on. How do we get from $1 trillion, that's what our members spend now on products and services, and if 1% of that is with women-owned businesses, let's just get to 2%. For right now, let's just get to 2. But that means we have to work together to find women who can supply $10 billion worth of products and services every single year. And if we can figure out how to get from 1% to 2%, then we will know how to get from 2% to 3% and 3% to 4%. And we can keep going until we get past 50% maybe someday. But it's a team effort. And so that's where we are, is how quickly can we find these women-owned businesses around the world? How well can we partner and be strategic? How can we create urgency? Let's do this in our lifetime, right? Let's not hand this down to our sons and daughters to do this work. We have the ability to do all the things that we're talking about. We have the ability to do it right now. So that's our focus.
Michelle.
So I would say the trends I'm seeing from where I sit, mostly on the entrepreneurial side, are the huge opportunities in innovation. And also I see the gap. The biggest gap with women-owned businesses are those companies or those types of industries that require innovation. And I know innovation is a broad term, and it has different meanings depending on who you're talking to. But the more innovation that is required, that's where the more opportunities are, and that's where the fewer women-owned businesses are. And so I'm often asked, well, how do I know how to be innovative, or how do I understand trends? And so here's what I do. I'm just going to share what I do. So what I do is I make sure that I am participating in the events or the circles where innovation is being discussed. So on the communication side, for example, as you know, I have a communications business. I'm looking at AI and virtual reality and big data. And you might be looking at innovation in the energy industry, or innovation in the pharmaceutical industry, or innovation happening globally. Look up these conferences, look up these trade journals, look up this, and actually just go open-mindedness, because the exposure of the level of thinking that's happening will trigger ideas in terms of, I could be morphing into that or adapting that or making an acquisition or growing that skill set within our company. So I would say the biggest trends are around innovation. That's also where the biggest opportunity is.
So, and we've got a couple more questions. I've been checking my phone, so one for time, but two, to see what the audience wants to know. So one of the questions, and anybody can feel free to take this, is they are faced with the challenge that a diverse business is often equated to an inferior business. So what would you say to the person that's facing that challenge, or even believes that diverse somehow equals inferior?
So everyone can choose how to define themselves.
Right.
So choose not to define yourselves as inferior, first and foremost. I know that it's been a huge challenge in the work that we're doing in other countries for women to want to self-identify as a woman-owned business, because especially in Europe, they don't want to be treated differently. And what we're trying to help them understand is this is just one more way for you to get into an organization to try to sell your stuff, to present to them your solution to one of their biggest challenges. That's it. They're not going to give you the business. You said this earlier. They're not going to give you business because you're a woman-owned business. But if we can all work together to help you get into the door, to pitch your idea, then we actually all have a fighting chance of moving that needle from 1% to 2 and 2 to 3.
Advisor before being here, as well as with the buying teams that I work with every day since being at WBENC, I have never once had anyone say that a minority business or a diverse business was inferior. I've always heard professional discussion about the requirements of the RFP and whether the person responded appropriately to that requirement. A lot of times people don't respond to the question that was asked, and in a corporate environment, either answer the question or don't bother, okay? And so I've never heard anybody say that it was about feeling they were inferior. It was about questions not being answered or about not being able to support the case for your product's ability.
So I have a different perspective on that. My experience has been different. That concern is a reality. It is not a reality for all minorities in business, but it is a reality, no different than it was a reality, and probably is to a certain extent, but less so now when you had affirmative action, right? And there was a perception that people of color weren't as qualified or good or skilled or educated or all those kinds of things. So that perception does exist. I'm not saying everyone in the corporate supply chain has that perception and some of it's bias. Some of it is lack of understanding. Some of it is, a very small amount is malintent. I would say it's a very, very small percentage. The truth is, as minority-owned business owners, sometimes we have to work harder to win the business because the questions aren't being stated overtly. They're not going to hear those comments because most people in corporate America are too sophisticated to say, they're minority owned, they're not so good. What makes them so good? But you are hearing it manifest in other ways. It's sometimes the questions that are not being asked, that are being asked of the non-diverse businesses, or there are just more favorable perspectives about non-diverse businesses. So the truth is, it is a reality, and unfortunately, and I've heard this situation, when you have a prominent, diverse business that has a misstep and they lose a major contract, it impacts us, other diverse-owned businesses, because it solidifies and reinforces the opinion, see, they're not so good. We might have the same credentials, we may have the same path, all those kinds of things, maybe even the same sales and revenue, although that's part of it, because the majority of diverse-owned businesses, I know it's a factor in women-owned businesses, but we're talking very specifically minority-owned businesses. Statistically, our businesses are smaller in terms of total numbers, so there's clearly capacity issues that are at play. So my advice in that is, one, I hear you. I know it happens. I've seen it. I've seen how it manifests. I've heard plenty of stories about it, and it's not overt in most cases. So there's a combination of things that need to happen. The first is there needs to be more education on the corporation side with the individuals and the teams that are making decisions about evaluations of diverse suppliers. There needs to be greater understanding on those decision makers and the influencers on those decision makers of the challenges that many diverse suppliers have. As an example, many of us don't have legacy businesses. We don't have parents necessarily that we inherited businesses from. So we may not have had parents who knew how to get a loan, or for that matter, buy a house. So we've had to kind of start our businesses. We don't have the generational knowledge and legacy statistically that non-diverse businesses have. That's a factor in capacity. So there needs to be some education on the corporate side about the challenges, and then also about implementing policies and practices in the process in evaluating and making decisions about diverse-owned companies. Now, on the diverse-owned side, as a diverse-owned business, I can tell you, we got to be on top of our game 100% of the time. It is a reality. We can't afford a misstep. You got to look good at every step of the way. And when I say look good, I mean everything that you're communicating, how you operate your business, the people on your team, the people who are communicating on your behalf, the track record that you have and how you communicate that, your website, everything. We've got to look so sharp so that we can take the discussion off the table about the fact that we're diverse owned.
So the only thing I would challenge you to do is remember I sat in the room with those buyers. So I actually know exactly what they said. And I agree that that's the perception. But I think that when we try to think about what we think people in a room are doing, we think about it based on our knowledge set and not their knowledge set. Their issue is that you're small. Their issue isn't that you're diverse or anything like that. They have a very large supply chain, and they are supposed to be minimizing risk for shareholders. They're supposed to be ensuring that their customer, who is a business entity out there, right, that their customer can deliver on the needs that they need to deliver on for the business. So I will tell you, there is definitely unconscious bias. I'm not even going there, right? We could have a forever conversation on that. There are traditional unconscious bias things that are going on in a room all the time. But from the standpoint of most of the people you would deal with in this WBENC network, there is a true desire, one, by the procurement teams to ensure that you're being evaluated appropriately. They won't ever understand not having come from certain situations or knowing inherently that you could go get a loan or whatever that would be, right? Or credit report or any of those things. But we have some of the best supplier diversity professionals in this network that are working very closely with those procurement teams and with those business teams. So I don't mean to infer to you that everything's perfect out there. I don't mean that at all. I just mean that you have to focus on coming to a solution versus pointing at what the other person's doing and saying they're doing it incorrectly. So I think it's this network's responsibility to ensure that we're always preparing you to go in. You say make sure you do the best you can. I'll tell any supplier out there that comes to talk to Pfizer or any of you, you better come in and do the best you can, because you're not getting that job, whether you're a majority company or a minority company. So sometimes we fall back into, I don't want to say the oh, poor me, because that's not what you said, but sometimes we're looking for a reason why we aren't getting something, instead of saying, am I thinking about innovation? Am I really, truly a better solution than the supplier that's there, and putting our best foot forward? So I would just say that I'm not going to take on the angle that I disagree with what you said, because I agree with some of what you said, but I also would challenge you to look at your situation and not automatically assume that your success is not happening because you're diverse, woman, disabled, LGBT, etc. Look at how you're trying to present your solution and the ROI somebody gets for doing business with you.
And so I'm going to give everybody a heads up that we have a couple minutes left, and I'm getting evil texts from Fela saying you need to be through by 12:30. So I want you to think of the last and you'll have 2 minutes, and I will cut you off. The last thing you want to leave this audience with. But Candace, before we do that, from a policy standpoint, is there anything you could see that might help bridge that gap between what Michelle was talking about and what Pam was talking about?
So honestly, I see value and credence in both sides. First and foremost, we have to show up being solution-driven to the problem that the corporation is having. What we deem the solution is may be very different than what the corporation or government entity is deeming what that is. So I think having a clear understanding, interpreting it the appropriate manner, right, of what the solution is that they need or what problem you're trying to solve, I think that first and foremost is ground. Then second, understanding the rules of engagement, meaning complete everything in the manner that you should, not leaving it out, ensuring you're having innovation there, but focusing on what the problem is that they're trying to solve, not what problem you want them to solve.
All right.
Plain and simple.
So, Michelle, 2 minutes. Leave them with something valuable.
I would say definitely in terms of thinking about how you grow your business, think about federal contracting. We are federal contractors. We are members of WIPP. I understand clearly the value of the organizations such as WIPP. Think globally. Sometimes we're just not thinking about it, so just start thinking about it. Just say, okay, what do I need to learn or know or understand to make some decisions here? Reach out, do some research, or have people on your team or whomever that you can assign this task to do research for you on market trends in your industry. Focus on innovation. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think part of our challenges are that we tend to stick with what we're comfortable with. So we've got to be willing to be uncomfortable and go into discussions or environments or places or conferences or countries that we are uncomfortable initially to identify opportunities. Those are my tips.
You actually did it in under 2 minutes. I'm impressed. Oh, you're Elizabeth, can you do that? 2 minutes?
Probably
Let's
not.
see it.
But I do agree that putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is the best way to change everything around you. We can't keep talking to each other alone. We have to broaden our conversations and bring in those that aren't part of this movement yet. And we need to make this a much wider circle. I would ask that when you go to the WBENC conference, come a day early, come to International Day, meet with the women and businesses that come from all over the world to get to be a part of this community of people that care about equal opportunity, that care about inclusive value chains. I think that there is a time in history, this is the first time in history where we have the world's largest companies wanting to engage women and other underutilized communities, whether it's LGBT, people with disabilities, ethnic minorities, in economic development and prosperity for everyone, but we all have to decide that we want to be a part of that. And so I would just invite you to be uncomfortable, take risks, and pay it forward.
Candace.
So be uncomfortable, yes. Turn to your neighbor right now and say, get involved. And so I say that to say this. People come to me and say, I don't like politics. If you don't like politics, you should not be in business, right? You should not. Because the things that are happening, whether it is on the Hill in Washington, D.C., or at the capitals of every state that you're in, or in your local community, meaning from your mayor's office. There is policy that is occurring. There are conversations that are happening that you need to be a part of. And I am excited that WIPP is going to be able to be a solution for you through our partnership with WBENC so that we will regionalize our reach so you can get involved.
And the final thing I would say is along the lines of what you've just heard from all of these ladies. You have a lot of people in this network that are supportive of us increasing women in the supply chain. And I mean all women in the supply chain. And so as you are interacting with every person at every opportunity that you get, remember to be part of the solution Talk about things that we can make happen that will drive the change versus sitting back and just saying, oh, this doesn't work or whatever. And remember that Fela, myself, our other regional partner leaders, as well as the ladies up here, we are here to listen to you, tell us what you think you need, and we will try our best to provide that to you through the great corporations that support us. Scott.
And my final thought would be, if you look at statistics with MBDA or all these other organizations, there are supposedly millions of women-owned businesses. And I'm not saying all of them are ready to do business with corporate America, but I think there should be way more than 15,000 certified in WBENC. There should be way more involved in WIPP. In talking with Elizabeth, I think there's 5 to 7,000, women-owned businesses are a part of WeConnect. So, and I think that the bigger challenge is that to make all these things happen, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, diverse businesses need to speak with a bigger voice. And the only way you can speak with a bigger voice is if you bring more people to the table. So if you're a woman-owned business and you hang out with other women-owned businesses that aren't certified, bring them to the table. This room next year, this conference should not be able to be held in this hotel next year. It needs to be, WBENC South covers 4 or 5 states, and there are, 800 certified WBEs? That makes no sense to me. So I think that's how you make things happen. Get it, like Candace said, get involved, support these organizations. And the last thing I will say is, I don't ever want to hear a business say, I got certified, but I don't have a contract. What's the value? So, anyway, thank you.
Other big discussion.
Thank you.